strengthen public education? Mr. Clay.
Well, I'm glad to lead off this question. I am an educator. I have seen many of the problems. There is a tremendous amount of squandering of funds. That alone can account for as much as $1 to $2 billion in the economy, in the budget. That's a tremendous savings. That money can be used then to expend on programs. There are three things that work, and only three things. There's no magic bullet on education. We have to talk about smaller class sizes. We have to talk about preschool education, Head Start, and we have to talk about getting our schools under control and making sure that they're a safe, wholesome place for our children to be. Those three things alone are what we need to get this whole thing started. Smaller classroom sizes is probably about the most paramount thing that I can think of. As a teacher who's had up to 56 students in my class at one time, I can tell you piling more students on in a classroom is not going to do it. That is exactly what's happening with our current budget. Thank you.
Go ahead and pass it to Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. I heard the governor say recently we spend 30% more on prisoner uniforms than we do higher education in the state of California. That is obscene. 40% of our budget is spent on education, yet we're still at the bottom. Something's wrong. I believe in vouchers. I believe in charter schools. My kids go to charter schools. And I deal with this as a pastor every single year. I'm getting myself braced for it because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have a family in my office with tears in their eyes with their children on a waiting list, a lottery list for a charter school. And that's wrong. They feel like the school system has failed them. They're working multiple jobs. They can't afford private schools. So that's why I support vouchers for that reason. The teachers are not the problem. It's the unions and the administration.
Mr. Stone.
Thank you. My solution is rather draconian. I think we ought to take the state education code and burn it. If you look at charter schools don't have to follow the state education code. And if you look at the scores of the students, they bring us back up to 1, 2, or 3 in the country. We've got to get rid of all these codes and say we must begin focusing on homosexual lifestyles in the schools. Let's get back to the basics of arithmetic, math, and history. And then all the mandates, the unfunded mandates that are placed on the schools. These are ridiculous. Let's send all the decisions down to the local school boards and know better how to educate our kids.
We'll also hear from the 77th Assembly on this question, but I do want to address the mission on my part. Bad moderator, I am flammable.
So it's okay, I'll take double on it.
Okay, well let's
Yeah, I don't want to break up this trend. Go ahead.
all right. You want to address the Arizona question?
No, I want 2 minutes on education.
Okay, well then, we're going to give you 1 minute on education. Mr. Hanson, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and I was a 2-time Teacher of the Year. I've published many books, degree from Claremont Graduate School, UCSD. Just real briefly though, some of what I did was portfolio assessment, cross-disciplinary writing. If all of the students do all the homework all the time, or at least most of them, we would do much, much better in school. We would have much, much fewer students in prisons. But this isn't going to happen with the schools falling apart. So what we need, of course, is a real focus on learning. And that can happen with a simple will. The students in Jordan outscore our students, and they have dirt floors. The students in Germany in 1989 took the same test we do, and it was given in English. Their upper 29% is the equivalent of our upper 5%. So we need to go back again to more like what our grand folks did in terms of spending. They, consumed less than they produced, and we have to have people really focus on learning and doing homework and attending to jobs in schools and making every penny count in our schools. And one way we can make those pennies count is get some more from the prisons, which are spending a disproportionate share. And my time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Well, I disagree with the premise of the question that the reason our students are failing or doing poorly is because of funding cuts. I think the partner statistic to that is funding in California is one of the highest in the country per pupil. The challenge is that we have too much administration in Sacramento. We have too much administration with the teachers' unions. We have too much administration at the local level. And for those, I'm endorsed by several educators and school board members, and the #1 frustration that local school board members have is that 80% of their budget is controlled by Sacramento. So even though that they have a budget to spend, 80% of it, they're told how to spend it. And they can't even make the decisions at the local level that they want to make to increase education at their own school district that we elect them to represent us at. So the #1, 2 things we need to do is wrestle control of the school system from the teachers' unions, give the control back to the classrooms, and give the spending control back to the local elected school board members, and let them do the job we elect them to do.
Thank you. Ms. Rubin?
My grandfather came to this country and could not read or write in any language. He made a life for himself, and 80 years later, I sit before you, a product of California public education. I have a master's degree in communication, and I'm working to represent you. I've worked on 3 gubernatorial, 2 U.S. Senate, and 2 presidential campaigns. Some would say I ain't done bad. So what's our problem? CTA is a very effective labor union. Listen to me, a labor union. It's not about education, it's about labor. And they've done what unions are supposed to do. They have negotiated at the federal, state, county, local, district level. We have to return control to the local schools. 40% of the California per pupil budget is spent in overhead. Our overhead is way too high. I now teach at Miramar College. I've seen, since I've been teaching for 25 years, I see overregulation and too much interference by Sacramento.
Mr. Wilson?
So I'll give you an anecdotal story. My son Eli is 13, and last year he was in a regular junior high school. He had 1 principal, several vice principals, several guidance counselors. The administration was full of people, and he was really having a difficulty in school. That education cost him $13,000 per student, so it cost $13,000 to put him in school that year. We moved him to a private school. We had 1 principal, no vice principals, no guidance counselors, lots of teachers, lots of involved parents, but we cut out a lot of the social engineering. We stuck to the basics of teaching, and he is doing fantastic. He's getting great grades, and I checked on the SAT scores, and they're the top 95% in that school for SATs, and they do that for $4,000 a year. Now, that tells you something, that we're wasting an awful lot of money on administration and social engineering, and a lot of things that don't help students move forward and achieve. But that's really what we want. We want our kids to achieve. Right time is up.
Mr. Hanson, I apologize for skipping you on last time. I'm going to start this round of questions. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and combine a couple of questions that have kind of on the same here from the audience. As a